is Linda Burton.
And this is Joseph Burton with Fighting to Stay Married. This week, we're going to talk about, we're going to continue the second part of overcoming grief. Last week, we shared a little bit about our story of the loss of a child. We're here with Pastor James and Pastor Kathy Flowers, and they're going to share this week a little bit about the things that they have went through. So welcome, Pastor Kathy. Welcome, Pastor James Flowers. How are you guys doing?
Thank you. We're doing good. Thank you.
Trying to stay cool. But anyway, thank you for having us on again, Joe and Linda. It's always a pleasure to talk to the world. We never know who's listening. We never know the impact that what any of us says will have on people, because unless people, comment and say something, we just don't know. But I know that we're not the only ones. You're not the only couple. We're not the only couple that have lost children. It's a very difficult subject matter. It's considered taboo in most circles. Most people don't want to talk about it because it's a little bit too painful. But I think it needs to be talked about, because sometimes people find themselves in this situation and they may not have a support group. They may not have people surrounding them that know what to say, because most of the time when an adult passes, of course we share our sympathy, but when a child passes, you're struggling to find the words of comfort. You're struggling to find the words to say, because you don't want to say the wrong thing. And so our story began in 1983. It was in September, very hot. And the first thing that I remember is that my husband woke me up and said, "The house is on fire." And so being awakened out of, a deep sleep, I was disoriented, didn't know what to do. I could smell the smoke. I could feel the heat. And so my husband was trying to get to our children, but the smoke had just overtaken the entire house. So we're just both just trying to do what we can to save our kids, find our kids. And before I knew it, just to get some air, rather than open a window, I hit the window with my fist. And this is why I have scars on both of my arms, because I ripped my skin trying to get out. And so I went around to the front of the house where their bedroom window was, and I was pounding on it, but I had cut and lacerated veins. And so I was bleeding. I was bleeding out. And I was getting weaker, and I couldn't understand why the window wouldn't break. And before I knew it, I was on the ground, and neighbors had, run over to see if they could help. And all I could say was, "God help us." That's what I remember.
Yeah, it's like that Sunday. We went to church. We were an average family with a 3-bedroom house and a 2-car garage with 3 kids. Went to church, had a nice day at service, and then Sunday evening went back to church. And then woke up early Monday morning and the house was on fire. It's just unbelievable how your life can change in a short period of time. And the things that I remember was trying to get to our kids. And I tried to open the hall from our bedroom, and it was just you couldn't go out there. It was, first of all, it was extremely hot and completely black. You couldn't see nothing. But it was extremely hot. and uh, I just couldn't get to him, couldn't go there. And I heard the window break, and I turned, and babe had, uh, my wife had broke the window, and so thought maybe we could go around the house to get to him. And so we went out the window, and I think she even cut her arm even more when we went out that window, and went around to the front, and like my wife is saying, like babe is saying, she was bleeding really bad, and she eventually I think she may have pounded on the window maybe a couple of times, and then she was out. She just passed out, and I was still trying to get in, I couldn't hear nothing, but I was trying to get in. Uh, it was just a horrible moment. Uh, and finally, the fire department and the ambulance came, and they were equipped to go in, and so they went in through the front. You just knocked the front in and went in, and a few minutes later, they came out with my oldest son and laid him on the ground, and then they came out with my youngest son and my little girl, and they laid all three of them on the ground there, and they were trying to work on them, and it just, it was just no response, no response. Uh, took them to the hospital. They took my wife to the hospital, and me to the hospital, and it just the disorientation, just disoriented. Don't know, in a almost a panic. Where's my kids? Where are they? How are they? And no one is saying anything to you. And you need to go through this breathing. You need to take this breathing treatment. And how is my wife? And that whole process, it's like a horror story. And it happened so fast. It just happened so fast. It's one day is wonderful. The next day, your whole life is just destroyed, just completely devastated. Uh, so that's what happened that night. But just so you know, uh, that wasn't the end. That was just the beginning. That was the beginning of this just horror story. Uh, I found out that my wife is going to be okay. They had to stitch her up and sew her up, and then they didn't want to tell us about our kids, so they by the time our pastor had got there and to the hospital, and they wanted him to tell us, and so you know they brought us together, and so the, he came in the room, and he started to talk about uh, Job, and how he had lost his family, and it was, it's just something you don't want or wish on anyone. You don't wish that kind of experience on anyone. Uh, I remember asking, well, did any of them make it? Did any of them make it? And they said no, none of three made it. And so it was just a devastating event that took place. From that point, our church started to rally around us. Uh, they became a family to us. Uh, Apparently, it got into the news media, and it became mainstream for maybe a day or so, and people were calling the church, wanting to know what they could do, uh, because not only we lost our kids, we lost everything in the house. There was just nothing left. The only thing we had was the car, and the car was full of smoke, but it was the only thing left that we had. We lost everything with our kids. Uh, so people were bringing things to the church. They set up where, because we couldn't really deal with that. The church family just took over, and we were just kind of in shock. We just couldn't believe that this had happened to us. It just couldn't believe that we had 3 kids, a family of 3 kids, and now it's just my wife and me in a day, within hours. Just and so yeah, the church really stepped up. Our church pastor's wife and one of the mothers in the church was on a truck out there hauling furniture. They just all was just because people were calling, because it got on the news. People were calling, they were donating, they were saying you can pick this up, and so they would take off in pastor's truck and go get furniture. Mother Green and Mother Williams, they would just go get furniture and bring it, and they got us an apartment where we could live. We ended up going to my mom's house and staying. I don't know if we stayed there a week.
I think it was a few days.
A few days before we came back. When we came back to Pomona, they had got all of this stuff, and got us an apartment and put all of this stuff in the apartment. Almost just completely furnished it, with stuff for us. And then the next process was dealing with planning a memorial, which was extremely difficult. At the time, Babe couldn't go to the mortuary. She just couldn't do it. It was just too hard. She just couldn't do it. So our pastor said to me, he said, "Come on, I'll go with you." And I remember he said these words to me, "James, let me talk. Let me talk, and I'll get it squared away for you." And I said, "Okay, Pastor," because I really couldn't say, I really couldn't have done that. And as the process went on, I understood what he was saying. Because when we got there, they started to show us packages for our 3 kids, and they started with the least expensive package, and then they said, "Well, we could upgrade to this." And of course, you don't want the least expensive. It almost as if it runs a guilt trip on you, and then they showed you one, then they said, "Well, here's another one that has more," and so it's, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do it. And so Pastor Green said, "No, we're going to do this one. We're going to do that. We're going to do this." And he got it all squared away for me. I didn't say a word. He just took care of it for me. I'll always be grateful to him for doing that. It's beyond the norm. He just took care of everything for us. And then there was a church that was a part of our community of churches who volunteered their church because we thought it would be a large funeral or homegoing. And so they planned it. Basically what we did was show up. That's basically what we did, was just show up. And I am so thankful today for Great I Am Church. I don't know how many years we were there, 27 years that we were at this church, and we became family. And they just took everything and just because we couldn't do nothing. We couldn't do it. We just couldn't do it. It was just too overwhelming, too broken. Just couldn't believe that we don't have our 3 babies anymore. And so that was at the homegoing. Pastor preached about 3 flowers. I think he 3 flowers that God made a bouquet out of in heaven. It just he and had an altar call, and the altar was just packed with people. I had never seen or witnessed it on that level. It was just packed with people giving their heart back to God. And so I said to myself, if it took this, then okay, but we'll see the babies again. But it was, like I say, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. After that was over, the grieving process is a whole nother experience. I don't. My wife could probably be able to speak for that for her. I know for me, there were some real stickers that really just took me to a place of almost wanting to give up. One was the realization that I didn't have smoke detectors in the house. At that time, I didn't have smoke detectors. They were probably a new thing coming out at the moment at that time. And, you know, I just didn't think, oh, I need to put smoke detectors in the house. That was one of the things that I really, really wrestled with. The guilt from not putting smoke detectors in the house. I felt like it was my fault that our 3 babies were gone. I know it wasn't, but it sure felt like it. Yeah. It really felt like it. The police had to do a report on the house. They had to send the fire department out to investigate what started the fire and all of that. And it turned out to be some kind of coil that was in a TV that I had bought from the pawn shop. It wasn't a new TV. It was a TV that I bought from the pawn shop. It was a nice size screen, and it was color. And I wanted a color TV. So there was a lot of wrestling with guilt from being the one that bought this TV and brought it to the house with this coil that caught on fire and eventually killed our babies. I understand it wasn't. I couldn't know that. I couldn't know that. But it really felt real. It really felt real. There were times I never mentioned to Babe about it. And I'm sure there are things that she probably didn't mention to me. But there were times I went up to Forest Lawn and just, you know, I as a guy, you know, it's difficult to just show your emotions, but it was so heavy in me, so heavy inside that I had to get it out. I couldn't keep it inside. And so my idea was to go up there and I would be alone with them. And that's where I did my crying and my yelling and my screaming. And I remember one time up there, our kids were down not too far from the freeway, And my mom was buried up the hill, not just a little ways up. And I remember getting caught walking from my mom's grave to my baby's grave. And I fell on the ground. It took God to say to me, James, look up, look up. And as I lifted up from the ground and looked up, it eased a little bit. It lifted off of me a little bit. But it would come back, it would lift, but then it would come back. And it's a process that you go through. You can be completely fine. And then it would just come on you really hard. You could be just doing normal things. My job was I used to work for Southern California Edison. They were so really good about this. They took collections all around the whole company and brought financial donations, told me I could take off as long as I needed to. I have a job when I'm able to come back. Just everybody was being just really good to us, really good. It wasn't them. It was inside of me. The thing that I had to wrestle with was inside of me. I can't imagine what people go through without God in their life, dealing with something like this. I don't know how you get through it. I know there are times that the Lord take us to a place. We could be okay. He would just take us to a place where it was like this wasn't our experience anymore, and hold you there. And people would wonder, how can you function? How can you just do what you normally do in the midst of this? And it's no way you can explain it to them. But then you come back down into a physical world, and that would come back on you. And it's just that process. The first year was extremely difficult. The first holiday, just the birthdays were just what I mean. I don't want to paint just a bad picture. What I say all of this to say this: God can bring you through. Yes. He brought us through this, and if He can bring us through it, He can bring you through. If you're suffering with this, the Lord can bring you through this. He can bring you out of it. I never saw this day. Never saw this day then. But this day existed. I just had to live to it, to get to it. So it's a process. It still is difficult at times. It's not as bad as it used to be, but it does hit. Mother's Day is just not good. Sometimes for me, I don't know how Babe takes it, but for me, it's just not that good. I try to do what I can, but Mother's Day, where are my kids to celebrate their mother? That kind of thing. So
let me ask you a question then, Pastor. So you mentioned that God brought you through it. So I wanted to ask, what are a few like practical steps that God has done to bring you through it? Can you answer to that?
Yeah, one of them is the perspective of knowing that this is not the end. The scripture says, you know, we don't grieve as other people grieve. And knowing the full, and I don't know if you can say you know the full, but knowing more about the gift of Christ, the extension of the gift of Christ that brings you everlasting life, to the point where the reality is, the truth is this: it's not over when we transfer from temporal. We move from a temporal place to an eternal place. And the reality of that, really, at that time, I was really searching for something. And the reality of the truth of the gift of Jesus Christ really helped me understand that this, although I feel bad and I'm grieving, is not the end of this. This is not the end. I look forward to seeing my babies again. I look forward to it. I look forward to seeing my oldest son. He wanted to play football. His name was Kenny. He was good. I came home one day from work and saw him out in the street catching passes. He was good. I'm like, that boy's pretty good. You know? Yeah, and so salvation gives you a hope. It gives you a hope in the finished work of Jesus Christ, that this is only a transferring from one place to another. And that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to seeing them again and renewing, because eternity is the other side of life that we haven't gotten to yet. That eternity side, the eternal side of life, I'm looking forward to spending eternity with those three. We used to call April Little Mama. Because she was like, babe, she would always put her hands on her hip, and she thought she was the mama. We used to call her Little Mama.
Wow.
So I look forward to seeing Little Mama again.
Wow, that's a pretty deep story. Wow.
You know, one of the things that the Lord imparted in my spirit up between the two graves was this, that your reality is not what you see. That is not the reality. The reality is what God says. And so the scripture tells us without faith it's impossible to please God. What faith is not just hearing something, it's acting on what you hear. So it's the concept of living faithfully. And that's what we try to do, live faithfully, knowing that in the end, it is the beginning. The end is the beginning. I look forward to eternity with them boys and Little Mama.
So let me ask you another question then, because I know with loss of children with couples, I have heard that a lot of couples don't make it, right?
Yes.
So and even sometimes Christian couples don't make it, right? Can you share like some practical moments that kind of helped you guys? I know the Lord is the center of it, but can you share something that kind of kept? I mean, did you have to fight that? I don't know, blaming each other or whatever. Did you have to fight some of that?
Yes. That is critical. Not blaming one another. I mean, we had the experience of being in a Married Couples for Christ group. For years, we were part of a family ministry, family life ministry, and some of the concepts that we already knew that we were practicing, that we were teaching in our church where we go. We knew some things not to do, like not to blame each other. We were wrestling ourselves with personal, at least I know I was, wrestling personally with blaming myself. It would have really been devastating if they would have blamed. That would have really just been devastating. And she never did. She never blamed.
There was no cause to blame him. It was an accident. As bad as it was, as bad as we wished it hadn't happened, it did happen. So the thing is to move forward, not to stay stuck. One of the highlights of our relationship is our friendship. We'll go to the mat for one another because we're such good friends. And I've told people this before, if I wasn't married to this man, I would want to know him because of who he is. He's just a wonderful person. So it's it's difficult when you don't have a good relationship. In fact, it's very, very difficult when you don't have a good relationship because you can end up saying the wrong thing, feeling the wrong way, acting in a way that makes that other, everybody's feeling bad. Yeah. So to put blame on another person or to even suggest that, why didn't you, the blame and the shame that pastors been, well, your audience doesn't know about that, but it's enough to have to deal with the loss. Now, how can we heal? And that's important because a lot of times people don't know how to heal. So having marriage education, relationship education, being part of a marriage ministry is so crucial to the survival of marriages because most people, statistically, 50% of people divorce after the loss of one child. We lost 3. And that's enough to take anybody out. That's enough for a person who want to commit suicide. Okay, my kids are gone. I don't want to be here anymore. But we had one another, and there was no way I was going to put more grief on him. No way that we were going to try to make life harder for the other person. And so it was me, James, and God. That's what it was. That was our survival mode. Me, James, and God. And because we believe in God's word, and we know that God didn't cause this, because somebody said, well, how could you pray to God if God could have stopped it? You know what? Accidents happen all the time, every day. So I'm not going to blame God. It was an accident. And so if I'm not going to blame God, I have to go to God and ask him to help me because I'm struggling. As you can see, I was tearing up. This has been over 30 years. But it still hits you in the chest like a sledgehammer. But the thing that we look forward to is that we'll see our kids again. And the thing that drives us now is reaching people for God. I don't want anybody to die and go to hell. So we do whatever we can through pastoring and the ministry that God has given us for couples. We're just all in it, Like when Linda asked last week, I'm like, okay, so you're going to be able to get through this? I was asking myself all week. And then this morning I was going over some of their pictures and papers and letters and people writing cards and all of that. And I kept saying, yeah, I'm going to get through it. I'll be okay. But As you can see, I'm a bit of a mess. But if I can say anything to anybody, it would be to trust God. Because otherwise, I don't know how people survive. I don't know how anyone gets through anything this painful. Because God gives us joy. And sometimes people don't understand that joy. Sometimes, like Pastor said, the altar was full, people rededicating their lives to God. My sister, who had been a backslider for, I don't know, a number of years, she was one of those. And I used to say, God, if it took that for my sister to come back to you, because I know I'll see my babies again. And I want my sister to be in heaven. So, sometimes people won't understand that. But you have to have spiritual eyes to see life as we've seen it now. So our goal is to do whatever we can to spread the good news of Jesus Christ to everyone who will hear, and to let people know that are joined together in marriage, or if they're about to get married, make sure that you end up with the right person, because this could be hell if you're not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could just be hell.
The hurt is unbelievable that you could create for another person when they're that vulnerable and that full of in grief that deep. The fact that Pastor Kathy didn't blame me, and I would have moments that I'd lose it, and she just hugged me. She would just hug me. So there really aren't words that you can say to a person when they're in that place. But the fact that she would hug me and never blame me, really, we had a good marriage to start with, but it really bonded us. It really bonded us.
Yeah.
So we were
cement.
Yeah.
Anybody try to come between me and this one? Yeah, you're in trouble.
So we became a real team.
Yeah.
And so that is one thing. One of the things we teach all the time is don't blame. Blame is a cancer
to any relationship. Don't even blame your children.
Not just your children. Don't blame yourself.
Yeah.
Blame is a cancer. It destroys relationships.
I was going to ask that question too, but I decided not to. But you answered that. You said you had a good marriage before the incident, but now it's even stronger now. I was going to ask that question because different people, and I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud. It makes me wonder when people do split, how was the relationship before? Could it have been good, or could it have been not so good? I mean, how was it before that? So you already had a good relationship, and then your maturity. It seems like your maturity too. You just didn't hear, Word of God or some of those practices. You actually did them. You actually practiced them.
That is key, Joe. That
you do. Because I'm thinking about myself right now. Like, I don't do a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? And that doing part is a very, very big part.
Yeah.
That faith is not just seeing
not
it.
Just hearing.
Not just hearing it, but actually doing the faith part. Okay.
James said it in one of his arguments. He said, "Show me your faith by what you say. I'll show you mine by what I do." And then he finished by saying, "O vain man, do you not understand that faith without works is dead, being alone? So there is no such thing as live faith without doing what you believe, what you commit to. Any faith you talk that you don't do is dead faith. That's dead. And anything dead can't affect a change.
Just sting up the place.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's critical. I think it's really critical for couples to have or work at having good relationships. You just don't know what's going to come your way. We don't want anything like this to come to anybody, but you don't know what life will bring you. So the two things you have is each other and God. So make sure your relationship with each other is good. Make sure it's good. You just never know how much you need this person that you're frustrated at. You just never know how much you need that person. And so, because frustration is only temporary, it only lasts for a minute. But some of this stuff can really get deep, and grief can really drag you through.
You mentioned something about how much you don't realize how much you need that person. I remember something popped in my mind where, say you're mad at your spouse, right? And you think, oh, I don't need them. And then the next day, something happens, and then they say, well, you should ask your wife that. And then you're like, right? You realize you need your wife, even though you think you might not. You got everything under control, or your husband, which one, whatever case it is.
Yep.
And it's always ironic how life will lead you back to show you.
Yes, sir.
Well, God knew what he was doing when he said it's not good for man to be alone. He knew that life is too challenging. It can take some twists and turns, and on your own, you may not be able to stand or withstand and have the strength to go through what life brings, and we never know what life is going to bring us. So, and then it says, I think it's in Psalm, two are better than one. Because when one is down, the other one can help pull the other one back up. You know, we're helpers to one another. Sometimes he can look at me and he wants, I guess I have a look on my face. I don't know. But, you know, it's almost as if you can read one another. You can read and sense when something is going on. Because if you're that close to the other person, because what happens is if you're in a good marriage, your souls are connected, you know. So it's like God makes it so that you feel like, hey, I can't make it without him, or I can't make it without her. And that's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Why we have a saying in our Family Life Institute. Life is too important to do without skills. It's just too important to do without skills, because the things that matter are the things that are in your heart. And basically what's really in the heart is relationships. It's not stuff, it's not money, it's not prestige or position, it's relationship.
And everybody wants one. But they think they can't have it. You know, it's
too important to do without skills.
You have to be and you use this all the time. You have to be intentional.
You gotta be what?
Intentional.
Intentional, right. Gotcha. Wow. That's powerful. Powerful testimony.
No,
Well, it is the Lord that did it. Brought us through it.
there's one other part I want to discuss. My favorite story in the Bible, the book, is Job, of how he, the whole story is good. But the part I want to talk about is his three friends that came to visit him, that came to, and their mind helped.
Courage.
I want to talk about how people can help when you're going through that time. What are some things that can help, and what are some things that can actually hurt or hinder the healing process?
Well, for me, it was my family, and a friend that, I mean, people just, they were trying to, they were just trying their best to hold us up, to do whatever they felt that would help us. And so there were times when um, they would just pick me up and take me somewhere, and um, we'd go to lunch or we'd go shopping, um, because people really don't know what to do. So they're trying to be practical. And sometimes all you need are people that will just listen. You know, you might have some frustrations, you might have some questions, you might just want to cry. I remember one time I needed to talk to somebody, and by this time he had gone back to work, and I wanted to speak to my pastor's wife, and she wasn't at home, and this was before cell phones. So I called one of the sisters in the church, and I just cried. And she didn't say anything. She just let me cry. And then when I was able to come back to myself, she said, "Let me pray for you." And she did. And then that was the end of the conversation. But that meant so much to me, because during all of that, you're a mixed bag of emotions.
Yeah.
You don't even understand yourself.
Yeah.
You don't understand your brain. You don't understand anything. It's like life just doesn't make sense anymore. And that's where I was. Life just didn't make sense anymore. You know, I remember he was talking about going up to Forest Lawn, and their grave, their site was on a slope. It was at the front of the slope, and it would just roll down. And then there was the gate, because there was the freeway. And I remember going up there one time, and I just wanted to roll down and be hit by a diesel truck. I was that low. I was that low. But then I remembered my husband. I said, "Oh, I can't do that," you know. But grief is pretty tricky. You just never know when it's going to hit you. You know, sometimes somebody wanted to treat us to a trip to Disneyland and stay at the Disneyland hotel, and somebody said, "No, no, 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 it's too many children." You know, but we weren't. We were going to see children anyway, but people just don't know what to do. They want to do something, and they don't know what to do. So I think this is helpful, because, like I said last week, Linda, this is a taboo subject. People don't want to talk about it. They don't even want to mention it, because we sometimes don't know what to do with death. You know, we all know at one point we're going to die, but when it comes prematurely, especially for children, it can be the most devastating thing that anyone can experience. It's just hard. You know, parents whose children have been killed at the hands of another person, um, uh, children who are taking their own lives, you know, children that die as a result of an accident, gang violence, and there's just so much that's going on in the world. But when an accident like this happens, it just throws everybody into, what do we do now? What do we say? You know, people didn't know if they should come around us, because they didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to do. And sometimes the best thing you can do is just be present.
Yeah. Yeah, that is something that is really important. Uh, you, it's not always good to be by yourself, but it at the same time, it's better to be with someone that's safe. And that and by that I mean it's okay. You need to know that if they're with you, they don't have to talk.
No, no,
They can just be there with
just be present.
you. And you need to know that it's okay if you lose it or you break down
Mhm.
when they're around you.
Right.
It's okay. And that is really important for people to know if you're going to try to help someone that's grieving,
Mhm.
because grief comes in waves.
Waves.
It comes in waves. And it's okay. It's okay for you to cry. It's okay for you to just, I don't understand it. It's okay. I'm mad at God. It's okay. It's okay. It's the only thing that really is important right now is someone is here with
You know, I was watching this one show, and it's around Christianity, right? And this young person who they wasn't really in the show. They're not really a Christian, but they end up at this place around Christian people, and she was reading. She's in a youth group, and she's hearing these stories in the Bible, and then she asks, "Why are all these bad stories in the Bible, right? In the Bible?"
you.
So it got me to thinking, like, it's like God, He wanted to show us how bad the world could be, right? Because and how, of course, how good it can be too. But He didn't leave anything. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff He didn't put in, but to give you a picture that this is how people can be.
Yes, yes.
You know?
This is life.
This is life. So as you live your life, you're not in a safe world. There are safe moments. So be wise, and I remember the passage: be harmless as doves, but wise as serpents.
No.
One of the reasons because where you live at,
Mhm, mhm.
right? That's one of the reasons why we teach kids, don't take candy from a stranger, right? We try to teach these moments because of the world that we live in.
Mhm, mhm.
So it's like it gives you a full picture, you know, of hey, this is where you are. I don't remember Jesus had said, in this world you will have tribulation.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Or have it,
But be encouraged.
Mhm,
but be encouraged, right?
mhm.
To overcome the world. So it's got me thinking about a few things. I'm like, wow, okay. It's like that's love.
Mhm, mhm.
I mean, to prepare you, like, hey, the world is not a good place in some parts, right? You got your good people. You got people that are good. You got your good people, but you also have your not so good people.
Right.
I mean, so it's
So, so humanity is a mixture of all kinds of humans who have fallen short of the nature that God placed in us. Uh, and we did this one thing through Adam. Uh, we decided that we knew better than God, so we decided we would take upon ourselves the responsibility of good and evil. And when we took good and evil on ourselves, this is the world we have. This is our world. Humanity determined we're not going to trust God with good and evil. We're going to trust ourselves. That was the whole point of the tree in the garden.
Mhm.
Don't eat of this tree, the knowledge of
yeah.
good and evil. You know.
And I think that's why we probably have so many laws. When we only need probably about 25. I'm just throwing out numbers. We probably only need about 25 laws. But since we're trying to take all this good upon ourselves, now we got like a million. You know what I mean? It can be much simpler.
You know, Jesus said it. He said, look, here's just one law. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law is encompassed in that, but in love. But the nature of human is not where we can do that.
Yeah.
That's why the same Jesus had to come and die for us, because our nature is just not able to do that.
Woo, that's deep, Pastor.
You know, it's just it's
I
because
should say pastor. No, I should say pastors. There's two of you. Wow, that's deep. That's man.
well, it's just going back. It's really about relationship. Our relationship with God.
Yes.
That's the
That's
start
where
of
it started.
We were created
That's
for
where it
relationship. You
Now
know,
I understand that title on the other side.
mhm,
Right? So I understand that. I like overcoming grief, but I understand that on the other side.
mhm,
You were on this side at one point, and now you're on this side of it. Right?
mhm.
And getting to this side of it for a lot of people is a challenge.
Yes, it is a challenge. It's not easy.
It's the most difficult experience I think that any human being will have in life is the loss of a loved one. And if you really love that person, it seems like you won't live through it. You won't get over it. I mean, it's so, like I said, I got teared up, and this has been over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's still fresh, you know, even though it happened that many years ago, it's still fresh because those babies came out of me. He gave me those babies, and those babies came out of me. So it was a part of me that died along with them. But what God has done as a result of that is turned our lives around and made our lives worth living. And so we're very intentional about the time that we have left here. We don't want to waste it. So, you know, we're doing like sometimes 3 and 4 broadcasts a week because we do not want to waste our time. We don't want to waste our life. And when we leave here, we want to make sure that people know we were here. We want to leave an imprint. Leave something. You know, don't just. I heard a pastor say this. Don't just take up God's breath and God's air. Don't breathe God's air and not give back. You know, don't just work a job and then you're done. You know, you retire. Now what? You know, because sometimes people retire and then they die prematurely because they didn't have anything to live for. So it's important to find out your why. Pastor was talking about that. Find out your why.
It definitely determines your what.
Yes.
Or how you see your what.
Yes, yes, yes. So hopefully we helped somebody.
That will transcend time, definitely. Because I believe that you speak it, and then just the sound waves, they just go out, continue going. They continue. So it has to be said, right?
Yeah, it gotta be
powerful. So, well, I really, I really thank you for taking the time to out today and spend your time with us and talking about this heavy, heavy, heavy topic.
Yes.
So, do you have anything else in closing?
Only that more podcasts like this is going to be made with us, and I wanted to share that of starting a channel with the Burtons and the Flowers of doing couples generation to generation. I wanted to let people know that we're going to start doing that of learning from each other, that their 50 years of marriage and the struggles that they've been through and our 28 years of marriage.
Are we getting there? We
28
getting
years
there.
of marriage can help somebody else that's 15, that's 10, that's 5,
One.
that's 1.
Yeah.
That we want to start this generation to generation. And I wanted to go deep and do the hardest one first and find other things that's hard that we've been through in life to break the chain of destroying marriages or break the things that's tearing us apart or tearing each other apart by our words, our actions, and different things like that. So I really appreciate that you guys are partnering with us to do that. And I look forward to doing more like this.
All right, we look forward to it. And thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk about this. This is really important. And we really appreciate you and think you're doing such a great job.
Right, right. Our hat is off to you
Mm-hmm.
because there are a lot of stories out there, but people are too afraid to do what you're doing and wanting to do. The internet has made it so that we don't have an excuse anymore.
Right.
If you have a computer, if you have a microphone, if you have a camera, there's no more excuses. People are putting everything out there, and not everything is good, but anything that we can do to help humanity, like what you and Joe are doing, we're all for it.
On
We're all
board.
for it. Yeah, we're on board.
Thanks again.
Thank you so much. We love you.
Love you
Love
too.
you too.
We ain't playing either.
And I play video games, so I'm not playing either. I'm pushing A, I'm pushing B and Y and the trigger buttons, and I'm pushing all those buttons. I ain't playing either.
Okay.
I'm picking up some health packets, and I'm fighting enemies, you know. So anyway, I was just joking, but yeah. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay.
You guys have a good rest of the week.
You too. See you soon.
Try to stay cool.
Yes.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.